I've got the thumbs up. We are live in the Cancer Center, take 2 for our topic tonight. I want to welcome everyone. We've had a bit of trouble getting here right now. But tonight we're talking about genetic testing for cancer. So the question that we have for everybody tonight is, do you know what your genes say about you? And that's a question that we're going to talk through with our friends here in the Cancer Center over the next little while. So are you guys ready?
Ready.
Ready. Thumbs up out there from all of you because we've had a lot of work getting here tonight for you. So welcome to Cancer Center Live. This is a project from Windsor Regional Hospital and the Erie St. Clair Cancer Program. I'm Allison Johnson, Manager of Communications here at Windsor Regional Hospital, and I want to introduce you to my friends tonight who are going to help lead us through this great discussion. Veronica is a genetic counselor here at Windsor Regional Hospital, and Sarah is a 2-time cancer survivor. So thanks to both of you for being here with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I look forward to chatting with everyone. Please send in your questions or comments. So I'm Sarah White, and I consider myself a 2-time cancer survivor. Thanks to genetic testing, I found out that I carry a stomach cancer gene, which is also associated with lobular breast cancer. So I not only have beat stomach cancer, but breast cancer as well. So genetic counseling was definitely a huge part to that. So I look forward to discussing it with Veronica.
Well, thank you. So I'm Veronica. As Allison said, I'm a genetic counselor. I work at the Windsor Regional Hospital Cancer Program. I work with patients just like Sarah and families just like Sarah's that maybe have a strong link to cancer in their family and kind of help them make informative decisions about their care and about whether or not genetic testing is appropriate for them. So I'm really excited to be here today and to kind of answer your questions and participate in this. So thanks for having me.
And I want to invite everybody into the discussion tonight. Cancer Center Live is an interactive live discussion. So we're here with some great guests, a fabulous topic. We want you to drive the conversation though. So send in your questions, send us your comments, and everybody who posts tonight will be entered into a draw for $25 Starbucks gift certificates. So there's one incentive, but I think that the other is just the fabulous discussion that we're going to have.
And the mug.
And a free Cancer Center Live mug that we love to promote. So looking forward to starting this discussion. And I want to start with Sarah. Your story is really interesting. Actually, I read about it in the paper, and that's how it caught my attention. So tell us how you got started on the genetic cancer journey and what you found out.
So originally, my grandmother had breast cancer, and she passed away, and my aunt was 41 when she passed away of stomach cancer. So back in 2009, my dad and I started to look into it with his family tree. We did all of his family, so my grandmother had 6 sisters, and it seemed like someone from each one of the sisters, someone had cancer, and each one of their kids had cancer. So when we brought the family tree back, the genetic counselor that we were discussing it with at the time, originally in London, they noticed that there was this stomach cancer was big. And I originally thought there was only one genetic gene. There was only one gene for testing for cancer, and it was breast cancer. So when they said, oh, there's this stomach cancer gene, I said, oh, well, okay. Then they had gone back, and we contacted our family, and turns out that they had already done the testing, which was a little upsetting because don't they know how genetics work when you pass it down to your family?
So you had family that knew that this gene was not close family, I'm taking it.
No, they lived in Newfoundland, so we don't talk to them very often. But so within 6 weeks of my dad getting tested, he tested negative because with the gene stomach cancer, it starts in the wall. How it was described to us was it starts in the wall of your stomach and it either goes in or it goes out. So it's very hard to test for, and they had said that almost every stomach in North America that they had taken out prophylactically had tested positive for cancer after the fact.
Of someone with the gene.
With the gene, yes. So obviously when my father got tested, 2 weeks later he came back, biopsy showed that yes, in fact, he did have stomach cancer and never knew it. Luckily, 11%.
So he already was progressing down that road.
Right. So then my brothers, both my older brothers and myself, all tested positive for the gene. And all of us elected to have our stomachs removed prophylactically. All of us testing negative for cancer beforehand, but all of us having the gene. And all of us had cancer and never knew it. So I had stage 1 stomach cancer and never knew it. But if I hadn't gotten the genetic testing, then potentially it would, I may not be here today.
Yeah.
And mine is also associated with lobular breast cancer. So back in 2011, I elected to have a double mastectomy with reconstruction, similar to what Angelina Jolie did. So very, very fitting that
She said she was Angelina Jolie before Angelina Jolie.
yeah. So that's why I consider myself a two-time cancer survivor. So I was lucky. I consider myself lucky that I found out that I had this gene and was able to beat it before it beat me.
For sure. Now, Veronica, I'm sure that there are people out there watching, asking the question, how do I get on this path? Or, am I a candidate? So what do you do if you think you want to have this testing done?
So genetic testing isn't for everybody. I think the biggest thing I would like people to take home that are watching this is really that what is important is what is your family history. So what types of cancer are presenting in your family? Are there people with very young ages of breast cancer? Someone in their 30s getting it, colon cancer at a very young age. So specifically, age can be a factor that may make someone think maybe there's a genetic component. How many people are getting it. I think, for example, in Sarah's family, there's a lot of cancer, it sounds like, and a lot of people with similar types of cancer. So that's really what we look for. So if you're in genetics, so if you're out there and you're thinking that maybe it would be something for you, it's always good to go to your family doctor and kind of elaborate on your family history. Now being in the holidays coming up, it's always good to kind of talk to your family and ask maybe more details about what cancers are in the family, what ages were people diagnosed.
It's good dinner conversation.
Good dinner conversation, of course, getting into the really heavy stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of families get together and this isn't information everyone is even comfortable sharing. And so that's a challenge for people. But I think ultimately if there's a history in the family and you're concerned and thinking maybe there's genetic testing may play a role, the first step is always to go to your family doctor and ask them and elaborate your family history, and then they can send a referral into our program if they feel it's appropriate.
So people are referred to you. What happens next? What's the next step there?
So when we get a referral from a family doctor, an oncologist, or whoever's referring a patient to us, we contact the patient and we send a family history questionnaire. And that's a really important piece because it allows patients and gives them time to kind of collect as accurate possible family histories as they can. And then once they return the family history questionnaire to us, we assess it, I assess it, and kind of triage the patient, and then they're given an appointment to come into our clinic, or we do a phone consultation.
Now, a couple people who posted online before tonight's show, thanks to everybody who did, and please continue to post. We have Helen Trentos. She says, is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma hereditary? My father passed away at the age of 56, and are there any symptoms? You want to?
So I'll try to answer kind of part of that question that I can. So there's certain types of cancer that are more likely to be hereditary. So non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is not typically one that, in a classic perspective, we'd think of as having a inherited gene mutation that would cause that. So family history of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, that's the only thing in the family. It's not too concerning for genetic links. So there's research in the field, so maybe that'll change in the future, of course. But at this time, that wouldn't be something that would be concerned about. And if you're worried about symptoms of Hodgkin's lymphoma, it's always good to go to your family doctor and ask them, and they can elaborate on that and kind of guide her in that sense.
Absolutely. And I think that that's going to be a general tone for the night. We can talk very generally, but I think that your family doctor, like you mentioned, is always the person that you want to start having this conversation with.
Definitely.
So, Sarah, you go through the testing, you and your family, and you find out that you are carrying this. What do you do with that information? How does that hit you?
Oh, well, actually, my brother and I went to, my brother Justin and I went to London. We had all of our stuff done in London. So we go to London for this test to meet with the genetic counselor, Dr. Young?
Dr. Young.
Yes. So we go in and we're thinking, okay, well, it's going to be, one of us is going to be unlucky. And then it was like, in casual conversation, he just says, yep, and you both have it. And then he continues to carry on, and we were like, what? We look at each other and we were like, what's happening? And then we leave, and I was like dumbfounded by it, and my brother was furious, obviously. And it completely changed our lives. And then you decide, well, what are you going to do? And when you sit down and you get all the information and you find out that this gene that I carry, it's the CDH1 gene. It's very uncommon, right? Very rare. And so then you have to decide, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to be proactive about it? And then when he says, almost every stomach in North America that they've removed has had stomach cancer, it's kind of a no-brainer. So my brother didn't want to do it. thankfully he elected to have it done. And
He didn't want to have the surgery.
Right.
He thought, let nature.
Right, because all of us had tested negative. So he was like, well, kind of, him and Han about it. And thankfully, like, I consider myself lucky that I was able to beat it beforehand. But I've never been that person. I've never been like a pushover or that person who's like, I'm
You don't want to wait for something when
yeah.
you're not going to play those odds.
Exactly. So, and then when it came to finding out that it's lobular breast cancer, it's harder to detect. It's usually more aggressive once it is found. And when the doctor was like, if you were in my family, I would suggest a prophylactic double mastectomy in the next 5 years. And I thought, well, that's a no-brainer then. I get to beat cancer before I even have to deal with cancer. Yep, sign me up.
Right, it's bad news, but it could be worse,
Yeah,
right? And I can't
yeah,
even
absolutely.
imagine getting that information because it's not you have cancer, it's you will get cancer,
And that's
or you probably will.
yeah.
It's
So
more of a risk. So we know that there's various different genes. So CDH1 is one of the genes that can predispose to breast cancer. There's other genes like BRCA1 and 2 is probably more familiar to people. But those are an important things to understand, their predisposition. So it's having a mutation within one of those genes would put somebody at a higher risk.
Okay.
And the risks are different. It depends on which gene and things like that. But yeah, definitely preventative surgery in those cases is an option for patients. Some patients might do screening and some patients do surgery, and everyone is different in what the decision that they make. So,
and that's what I wanted to ask you about next. That must be a difficult conversation to have, and how do you have that conversation, or how is the conversation had with patients when you get that information back?
So when we get a result that shows that a patient has a genetic mutation that means they're at risk, or maybe has explained why they developed a cancer in the first place, some patients, I think, when they come into the appointment and are, have thought about it and they're really kind of understanding what they would do and what would be right for them, and then other times patients have no idea. They're really struck by the fact that they were positive and they, are surprised. And we give them time to think about it. What our role is in a genetics clinic isn't to necessarily say, you need to do A, B, and C exactly at this time. It's more just, here are your options. This is what we know genetically you have. And these are your risk factors. This is, what we can do. And then let patients kind of make that decision. And so it's really our role is to help guide people in those decisions.
Now, you said it was a no-brainer. You heard this information and you knew what you had to do, but some of your family members had a different.
yeah, and in fact, I have a cousin who I believe still to this day, and this is going back now, back to 2010 when we found out. I still don't think that she's even been tested, and her father carries the gene. So it's all up to whether you want to find out or not. So. Everyone's different, and it's completely up to you.
Even taking that step to do the test is not something everyone that even knows it's in their family will decide to do. So it's something that it's a very complex decision for sure.
I have a question from Jennifer. Jennifer, thanks for joining us tonight. She says, I'm a cervical cancer survivor. Should I consider getting tested? And also adds to this, my grandmother passed away from breast cancer as well. Thanks for the question, Jenna.
I think that would bring up a very important part is that not all cancers have a genetic component. Cervical cancer is one of the cancers that we would traditionally think of as not being hereditary. So a personal history of cervical cancer wouldn't set off any red flags to suggest a hereditary component. But having a family history of breast cancer, I would want to know, what is the age of the person that was diagnosed with breast cancer? And are there any other family members? If there's a family history of breast cancer, we want to know, is there anybody else? Ovarian cancer, is there any ovarian cancer in the family? So those would be things that we'd be wondering about. But the cervical cancer wouldn't be too much of a concern for genetic testing.
What is the test? Is it a blood test?
It's a blood test. So a lot of people come in, even when they come into their appointment, and they're kind of wondering, are they going to be probed and prodded in a way? But it really is, a blood test that's done, but yeah.
Now, you started to talk about this, Sarah. You said that some family members of yours had already been tested and knew that the gene was in your family, but they didn't mention it. What responsibility is there? Or do you talk to people when they have it about, maybe you want to have this conversation with your family, or these people could benefit from that?
Yeah, so a practice in our clinic, and I know a lot of different clinics across Canada do the same thing, is that once we identify somebody in the family that has a genetic mutation that predisposes them to cancer, we know it's hereditary, right? So we want to be able to help them inform their relatives. We encourage patients to tell their relatives. So we write a letter to the patient to their family. It's de-identified, so there's not like any factors of the letter that would say, this is your personal history, but just to say, this has been found in your family. These are the things that, you could choose to do in terms of testing, and here's how to get tested, and here's how to contact our clinic. So we try to
make
tools,
it as easy as possible.
Make it as easy as possible.
That can't be an easy conversation to have. And I have a question here from David. David, thanks for the question. For Sarah, how did you bring this up to your family?
I guess my father was definitely very supportive. In that he came to all of the appointments with me when we met with the genetic counselor, and I don't know, really. I think it was just like all of us were involved, and it was like, hey, guess what? We got this in our family. Lucky us.
Haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah.
How about this?
And then it was an 11% likelihood that me and both my brothers would have this gene. So it was, do you want to go? Hey, you want to go for a blood test with me? That's like, and that's pretty much all it is, right? So,
but a pretty important blood test.
Yes,
so it
absolutely.
turned out. So
yeah,
good.
Yeah, and it's still tricky to bring up the fact that my cousin hasn't been tested, right? But that's her decision, and she has her family and my uncle, and they make their own decisions. So I'm, it's none of my business. So if they decide not to do it, then that's up to them. So.
A comment, Sarah, I think it's for Sarah, you're brave and thank you for sharing. And absolutely, thumbs up to Sarah. She is very brave and we appreciate everyone sharing. And another comment, wonderful topic, thank you. I think it is an interesting topic. Anybody who, has a family member who they are thinking now of who had cancer, what can we do about that? And again, like you said, some good conversations to be had this Christmas season.
Merry Christmas. Here's your family history. I think
We should have saved this topic for December. We have another comment from Jennifer. Jennifer, thanks for joining us tonight. And she says, it's very scary when you find out that you are a carrier. Nothing prepares you for hearing that you're positive. And she wishes that there was more follow-up about those questions. What kind of follow-up is there? And especially in terms of discussing possible surgery.
Yeah, so generally when we do genetic counseling, so we're doing a pre-test appointment, so I meet with the patient in person and we review obviously the family history, the genetic testing, what genes are we looking at as possible in the family that could be having a mutation. And then once we get the result, we call the patient over the phone and tell them their result. And sometimes it does take a bit to sink in, and so we usually do a follow-up phone call, and then they're booked with our geneticist to review that in person, so we review the results. And there has been a gap with patients that have felt that continuity, that keeping up with the clinic and maybe knowing what decision may be next is lacking. And so what we've tried to do, what we're working on, is we have a support group called GIFTS, and it's called Genetics Information for Today's Support, and it's really for families within our community that maybe have a hereditary predisposition to cancer, and we invite them to come once every few months to just sit together and we talk about some kind of hot topics in the field, and I know we'll probably touch on a few of those. It just allows them to connect with our clinic, because usually it is just a one-time consult afterwards, and maybe that long-term support could be better.
So can anyone go to this support group, or do you have to be involved in the genetic testing, or?
Usually it is for families who have a confirmed mutation in the family, so it's more for those families.
Okay.
So not necessarily for the general population, but for families, if you're out there and this is striking to you that maybe you have a BRCA mutation or Lynch syndrome or something like that, it would be something you'd be welcome to contact our clinic to get more information on.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Information for that is through the clinic here.
Yeah, and it would be available on our website as well.
Okay.
And I'm sure we can link to the bottom later.
So a question from the audience here, what is the criteria for testing? I think we've touched on this, but is there a specific checklist that you might be able to go down in your head if you're thinking about it?
That's a complicated question to answer, because there's various different criteria. So we tend to think of breast and ovarian cancers kind of, I don't want to say clustering together, but in a genetic perspective, and we're talking about BRCA1 and 2. And then there's, colon cancer, and there's genes that can predispose to stomach or breast cancer or polyps in the colon in different areas. So there's various different things that we look for. But some major red flags that, if you're sitting watching this presentation, or watching this interview, you want to think about is, the young people being diagnosed with certain types of cancer, like breast cancer, colon cancer at young ages, multiple family members with the same types of cancer, even if not necessarily at the youngest ages, but just a lot of people getting the same type of cancer. And then also talking about maybe one person, but getting cancer twice. So somebody getting, colon cancer and then cancer in their uterus, or breast and ovarian. So multiple different types of cancer in one person is another red flag for something genetic. Of course, if there's a mutation in your family, that's, you could be tested. So there's different provincial criteria. So if you have a family history, again, I want to talk to your family doctor, and then they would be able to kind of determine which criteria you may meet and then refer to our clinic.
What if you don't know your family history? What if you have no living relatives or you're adopted? Is there any opportunity there?
That's tricky because a lot of times, the provincial criteria, so there are criteria that are, Ministry of Health criteria that our genetics clinics across Ontario follow, and that's when we can offer genetic testing, is if someone meets the criteria. So if you don't know your family history, if there's no family history in the case of adoption or something like that, that becomes challenging. If someone has a young age of cancer themselves, but they don't know family history, we can maybe do something if the cancer could be likely to be genetic. But it is tricky in that case. So sometimes people consider paying out of pocket for the testing, but that usually is not covered by the ministry. So,
But would they have that testing done through you, or there's companies out there that do that?
yeah,
testing?
it wouldn't be done through our clinic.
Okay.
Yeah, if they're wanting to do it on their own accord and kind of paying for it out of pocket, it's not something that we facilitate. All our
Okay.
patients that we see are through the province.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a comment from Beth Howell. She said, I just went through this testing and thankfully found out I'm not a carrier. It relieves the worry that I will pass it on to my children. So thank you for sharing that, and congratulations to you. That must have been a relief, but it's also another, if you are the one who's had the experience and you're pushing, do you see that a lot, pushing other family members to get it?
You mean if
And
if
kind of
somebody
feeling
has
that
something?
it's like the personal responsibility, like I've had this, so let's make sure that you don't, or that.
Oh, I was totally that person, and then I was, and then they were like, I'm not going to have that test done, and that's my choice. And then I was like, okay, fine.
That
I'll
seems
back
like
up.
it weighs heavy
Yeah,
on you, though. It
yeah.
would.
Yeah, but I was like, oh, okay, we beat it. Let's do this. Let's go. Let's go. Right?
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, I don't want to find out. So
That would be tough.
Yeah, it is for sure.
But I think family, like your dynamic with your family or your relationship with your family, really affects the decision to have testing. A lot of patients I have that come in that maybe have breast cancer themselves, they really say, and I ask them, what is your motivation to do testing? Why are you here? And it's good for me to understand where people are coming from. But most of the time they say, I'm not doing it for myself necessarily. I really want to do it for my daughters, for my children, for my grandkids, so that, if there is something, they can do something and take action differently, and maybe be screened and catch it early, or have preventative surgeries and do things. So a lot of times it is kind of that driving factor to actually do the test as the family.
I wanted to ask you a question. You were talking about the breast cancer gene, and you mentioned all like the ladies down the down the family tree. Is there a link with men? I thought I heard that it's linked also with prostate cancer. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's a common misconception that this is something that only affects females, and genes are inherited as equally from your mom's side as your dad's side. So it's very important, even getting your dad's history, even if there's, your dad's sister had breast cancer or something like that, knowing
on
that
your
is
dad's side,
important.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to BRCA1 and 2, if there's mutations within those genes, it can predispose to breast, ovarian, prostate, pancreatic, and there's some melanoma as well.
Yeah, so the sons, sons and fathers, they should be getting tested as well.
We always sometimes we think more so we focus on the females because their cancer risks may be higher,
Right.
But it affects men just as equally, and there's different screening we do for that, so it impacts their health too.
It's pretty cool. While you're talking about this, I'm thinking, and I'm actually getting excited, like how advanced science is, that this is even an option and an opportunity in saving lives before they're really put in jeopardy. So I have a comment from our producers in studio saying, still sideways, but
Which way?
okay,
This
people
way?
are watching. Is it better if everyone? I want to thank everyone for bearing with us tonight. We didn't actually realize that we were sideways, but what I will promise you, because this is a really important discussion, and I think that a lot of good stuff is out here. After tonight, I will go back and do some editing and flip it so that you can watch it straight up tomorrow if you want. Thank you for bearing with us tonight. And we do have some more comments. This one was posted yesterday from Jeanette, and she said, this one's a bit long. She says, I've had the testing done in London at 18. I'm positive with BRCA, and yes, had done nothing about it. until I got pregnant and found out I needed a full hysterectomy for cancer in 2004, and then in 2013 a full mastectomy. Fought hard, still here, but now dealing with HCC in the liver. Now, what Jeanette says is, be careful though, because insurance companies won't like it. Higher fees or denial, so yes, it's good to know the future, but sometimes it's better to take your chances. She says, I live life, not teaching anymore, just relaxing and battling this new condition. So a few interesting things that we can touch on here. But first, Jeanette, thank you for sharing your story, and all the best to you with this next stage in your journey here. Interesting about the cost and the insurance, and I guess you're a risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically it's always been thought of, and it has been a barrier to people deciding to have genetic testing, because essentially it's predictive or pre-symptomatic testing a lot of the times. And so if someone's choosing to do a test for a mutation that's known in the family, before they could have been discriminated against. As of March of 2017, so as of March of this year, there's actually a federal law that was passed called the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act. And that was something that genetic counselors across Canada and MPs and everyone lobbied for a very long time, because people not deciding to do this based on that fear alone, we were kind of worried about those patients, right? They may not be having those options. So so it's nice that this law is in place and it attempts to prohibit that we call it genetic discrimination when that happens. If someone is discriminated against or given really high premiums because of their genetic status. So there's steps being made to help prevent that. Do you still have to disclose
this though?
I think that they're not able to ask the question. And so, that's a change. And the difference though is that if they ask about history of cancer in the family, you still have to disclose that information. So there may still be some degree of, obviously sharing that history.
But I've taken proactive steps to limit that. Isn't something that's available for the follow-up question.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Sarah, did you experience any of that kind of discrimination?
Yeah, so I went to go refinance my mortgage, and I had life insurance on my mortgage, and when it came back, they were like, well, you can't have that life insurance anymore. And I was like, well, what do you mean? They were like, well, you have stomach cancer, Jean. I was like, I don't have a stomach. How can I get stomach cancer
totally
again?
The risk.
Yeah. I was like, no, so it's not going to cost you more.
Right.
Or, so it was very funny, but.
I wonder if after this law that would have changed or would be different for somebody moving forward.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm going to look into it.
Yeah. Interesting. Anything that we haven't covered that you think that we should touch on? Here's a general question for you. What do you want to talk about?
I was like, can I put a plug out there for my next event? So I've done a lot of things with, I don't think I mentioned it, I'm a paramedic, and I've done a lot of fundraising for the Cancer Center and the foundation. And my next event, if anyone likes beers, it's Pints for Prostate, Thursday, November the 30th at the Manchester Pub at 7 p.m. So it's $20. Gets you 2 pints and appetizers. It's totally worth it, and all the money from it will be going to Ride for Dad, which in turn will then give the money to Dr. Pandy's lab. And as we all know, Dr. Pandy's lab is doing great research with dandelion root on prostate cancer and other different like breast cancers and different things like that. So it's definitely a good cause, so you guys should come.
Thank you, yes. And I want to thank you actually for all the work that you do. The same article that I read that where I learned about your experience, I also read that Sarah has raised more than $100,000 or worked with people who have for the Cancer Center and the foundation here, so thank you. Thanks for that. Veronica, anything that we've missed on...
I think there's genetics is pretty complicated, so there's a lot of things that we could cover. But I think the most important thing, if you're watching this and having the questions, is just understand that it's not very common for somebody to have a hereditary, a mutation in the family. It's more the less likely outcome. People can be referred to our clinic and go through the genetic counseling process and not always be offered genetic testing in that sense.
So just because you make it here doesn't mean
just
you go to the next step.
Exactly. And so the whole point of the genetic counseling process is to really evaluate the risk. And some people may say, well, I just want the blood test, I just want to do it. And even if they don't qualify, there are provincial screening programs. The Ontario Breast Screening High Risk Program is an example. So for women who have family members with breast cancer at a young age, have ovarian cancer, a specific type of ovarian cancer in their family, and different combinations of family history, may get breast mammograms and breast MRIs annually as young as age 30 to 69 if they have, if you have a gene mutation, you get in this program. But even if you have a family history and a genetic counselor evaluates your risk, we can get people into these programs that are beneficial for them, even if there's no genetic testing. So ultimately, I think that coming in, if there's a suggestive history, of course, could potentially benefit, even if maybe genetic testing isn't necessarily the end result. But we can work through that and talk to patients, and that's what the job's about.
And I have another question here from the audience that I think follows up on the tests that aren't done here. If you go to the States or you go to a private company, does the Cancer Center, will they then review that testing?
So if someone chooses to pay out of pocket or has the resources to do that, and the result comes back and finds something, they would bring that to their doctors. They could call our clinic or contact our clinic, and then we would be able to kind of review that with them. A lot of the genetic testing companies that do it have genetic counselors on their staff in the labs, so hopefully they would have had access to genetic counselors through that. But it would be, if it's done in a CLIA certified lab, which is like a certification the labs need to meet, then it definitely would be recognized, and they would be following certain standards of care in Canada.
So we have a couple comments here, one from Robin, and she says the Cancer Center Genetic Clinic is fabulous, and that's underlined with an exclamation point. So thanks, Robin. And also another comment from Robin, she said, I think this is back to the point that you were talking about before on insurance. She said, unable to qualify for critical illness insurance for mortgage coverage. But again, similar, that may have changed or perhaps not. But
I think there's still some areas that are
some
unclear.
gray areas.
Yeah.
And a comment from Stacy. She says, I've had the testing done and found that I have Lynch syndrome. Mm-hmm. And thankful that I can now be vigilant in my own care and teach my children young. So what is Lynch syndrome?
Lynch syndrome is a hereditary colorectal cancer syndrome. It's also what we see in that families with Lynch syndrome is uterine cancer. So a combination of colon, uterine, stomach, small bowel, various different types of maybe skin findings and things like that. So Lynch syndrome is one of the more common causes of hereditary colon cancer, and we do genetic testing for that, of course.
And it says that she can be vigilant in her care and teach her children. Is this one that you would have surgery for, or just?
Not necessarily preventative surgery. So with Lynch syndrome, what we do if someone has that condition, then they start colonoscopies as young as potentially age 20, maybe 25, depending on the youngest age of colon cancer in their family. And they actually do them every 1 or 2 years. And so really the standard of colonoscopies, you don't start those if you have a history until 50, and you do them every 5 or 10 years. So if we know you have Lynch syndrome, unfortunately, the cancer, if it does develop, tends to be more quickly growing. So the intervals of screening are shortened. And I think that really helps, obviously, detect it earlier. And the whole goal of screening is to really catch cancer at the earliest stage. If it does develop, of course, it's not guaranteed to. If there's a mutation there, it's just a predisposition or a higher risk. But definitely doing the screening helps a lot.
All right. Well, thanks, Stacy, for joining us for the discussion tonight. I don't think we have any more questions. If you want to get a question in, you've got 5 seconds to send it in. While I'm thanking our guests tonight, did I miss anything? I know you said there's a whole world out there, but is there anything that people watching tonight really need to know if they're thinking about this that we haven't covered?
I just don't want anyone to panic, right, in watching this and think, oh my God, I gotta go get tested. Like, you have to look at your whole family tree. And my cancer was so rare, the gene that I have is so rare that, I say, well, that people ask, did you have any symptoms before you got tested? And I was like, well, I had acid reflux. Well, I have acid reflux, so maybe I'll go get tested. And I'm like, it doesn't quite work like that. So don't panic. Definitely talk to your family doctor. If you have any, issues, or you think you may have some symptoms or something, talk to your family doctor, start there, and then see where that goes. But yeah, I don't want to
I think that's
widespread panic because of this.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely kind of using the opportunity and asking the questions in the family, who had cancer is what's important, obviously. What age were they diagnosed is the key to ask. And also what you want to be finding out about in the family is the age of the diagnosis of the primary site of the cancer. So collecting more history and getting more information and not panicking, I think is a really great point. I'm glad you brought that up, Sarah. I was worried about that too, that everyone's going to rush to their doctors and get a referral. But of course, take the time, get the history.
You're going to be busy.
And then we're going to be busy. We're already busy. But one of the things I think, and this is more so for patients that are watching, they're patients of the cancer program, we have an educational program called Renew, and I actually do a workshop within that program. So it's one of the sessions in Renew, and patients that are kind of at the end of their cancer journey maybe are invited to attend Renew, and then we do a workshop where we build your family tree. And so it's interactive. I give you the tools to kind of build your family tree, and we evaluate it and look at the risks. So I find it really fun. I think patients really like it. And so if you're a patient in the cancer program, that would be something that could be of interest. So take a look.
And you mentioned at the beginning, Angelina Jolie, I bet your phone was busy around that time when she was in the news after.
And that was
going
right
through
when
this.
that was when I started here, and I started at the cancer center
With a bang.
And I was here only in a contract position. It was really kind of we were going to see how it worked, and were we going to build a program? Was it going to be successful? Because I think Sarah alluded to it, that you had your genetics from London, and we didn't. The genetics program here at Windsor Regional wasn't always here. It was an outreach clinic from London, and wait times were really long.
Yeah, it was
and
like quarterly, I think, that they came to Windsor, so it was, you had to wait so long in between.
Yeah, or people would have to travel all the way to London to do this, and so having me here and hopefully expanding the program is something like our wait times are still. Most people kind of are surprised our wait times are long. They're about 8 to 9 months for a routine appointment, but it's because it's a very kind of common question, and people are interested in it, and so we definitely,
And it's just you, right?
It's just me, and we have somebody that does. She actually covered my mat leave, and she does a little bit of work for us too. Yeah.
Well, there's 300,000 people in Windsor, so yeah, you're going to be busy.
Busy.
A final comment from our audience out there. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Talking to children is very difficult. Parents may feel guilty for passing along the genes. Genetic counseling is helpful there. I understand that you would feel guilty, but also like offering such hope, right? You're offering this information at a good time, right?
I definitely felt like that my dad felt really guilty. Sorry. I'm like gonna get choked up. But I'm like, how is that
Your fault.
Yeah. I was like, you got the gene from your mom, who got it from somebody else, who got it from somebody else. I was like, there's no reason to feel guilty. And I was like, and we were all lucky. We all got to beat it. So I was like, there's no need to feel guilty about it. So
Yeah, absolutely.
But yes, I can understand where they're coming from. That definitely, it's hard to talk to your children about it.
Sure. And lucky that we're living in this time when it was an option.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
can all go through this together.
Yeah.
And if there is something in the family that's not guaranteed to be passed on, there's usually in most cases hereditary cancer syndromes are dominant, and so there's a 50% chance to pass it along. So just as much, no one has control over the genes they pass along, but there tends to be that feeling of guilt, I think, for sure.
All right. Well, I think that this is a good note to end it on. Thank you so much for talking with us
thanks for
tonight.
having us. Thanks for watching.
Thanks everyone out there for watching with us tonight. We're going to call this one Cancer Center Sideways. As promised, we'll flip it back and send it back out tomorrow so you can all view this sitting upright. We'll also post additional information about genetic testing. So if you have any more questions or you want to dig in a little bit further, that will be there for you. Cancer Center Live comes to you from the Cancer Center every third Wednesday of the month. So I hope you'll join us back here in December. Our topic next month is smoking cessation. So lots to talk about there again. You want to join us again? Know anyone that could join us? If you want to be a guest on our show, we're still looking for that person. But anyway, stay tuned and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.